video operator speaking, Douglas Schindler of Action Legal Video, Inc., 132 Nassau Street, New York, New York. We are here on this day, April 14th, 1997, 10:35 a.m., and this time continuously recorded on the video at the offices of Jones Day, 599 Lexington Avenue, New York, New York. Take the video deposition of Andrew Schindler on behalf of the defense in the matter of Howard A. Engle, M.D. et al. Versus R.J. Reynolds Tobacco Company et al. In the Circuit Court of the 11th Judicial Circuit in Newport, Dade County, Florida, case number 94-08273CA. Counsels, please introduce themselves.
Stanley Rosenblatt on behalf of the plaintiffs. You should also mention that this deposition is also covering the Broyne class action. It's being taken both in Broyne and in Engle.
Bob Weber on behalf of R.J. Reynolds Tobacco Company.
Charles Blix on behalf of R.J. Reynolds. Hugh Whiting on behalf of R.J. Reynolds Tobacco Company. David Hardy on behalf of Philip Morris and Lorillard. Ed Moss on behalf of Brown and Williams. Michael Russ on behalf of Brown and Williams.
Williams Associate on behalf of Williams and Brooks.
You ready to write hand for me, please? Swear testimony about the truth, the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Stanley, before we get started, I just want to confirm for the record that the camera will remain focused on the witness without any zooming in or out. It will just remain stationary. Is that correct?
Yeah, that was my understanding. Please tell us your name and your business address.
Andrew J. Schindler, business address is 4th Main Street, Winston-Salem, North Carolina.
What is your present position with R.J. Reynolds?
I'm President and CEO of R.J. Reynolds Tobacco Company.
And how long have you occupied this joint position?
Since July of 1995.
What was your position immediately before assuming those two jobs?
I was President and Chief Operating Officer of R.J. Reynolds Tobacco Company.
When did you begin with R.J. Reynolds?
I began joining the company in May of 1974.
And it's been continuous employment. You've never left for a period of time and been employed by someone else.
It's been continuous employment with RJR family of companies.
What are R.J. Reynolds Tobacco Company's leading brands today?
The leading brands are Doral, which is our actually #1 brand in Winston, Salem, Campbell.
What percentage of the market does Doral have? The total tobacco market?
Doral has about 5.5 share points or so.
Compared to Marlboro, for example, which as I understand it is the leading brand.
Yeah, Marlboro, the leading brand, it's the 31, 32 share point of the market.
How many discount brands does Reynolds have?
Well, I have to guess at this a little bit because there's quite a few private labels and so forth. In terms of total number of discount brands, when you get into all the private labels, probably about 50 or 60 or so because of all the private labels.
What is your leading discount brand?
Doral.
So when you say Doral is the leader, you're talking about the discount brand.
No, Doral is actually our largest share of market brand. It also is our leading discount brand.
Okay.
It's our #1 brand.
What is your #1 full price or premium brand?
#1 full price brand today would be Winston.
Now, what does Winston sell for retail? Package of cigarettes.
That will vary depending on the market because of various types of discounting that go on the market. So it would be somewhere on average about $1.80 a pack, $1.78, $1.90. Depends on what market you're in, what type of discounting activity goes on.
Okay. And how about the Doral discount brand? What does that sell for?
That will be, again, depending on what goes on in the marketplace, somewhere around $1.40, $1.45, $1.35, $1.39. It varies.
Do you have a background in marketing?
Seriously, in terms of my career, in terms of being, prior to being in this job, being in marketing?
No, in terms either of this job, Reynolds, or any previous job.
Well, I was in the sales organization in the mid-'70s.
Of Reynolds.
And then my direct marketing line accountability is what I have done since I've been in this job as president.
How would you define marketing?
Marketing is the organization within the company who's accountable for understanding consumer needs and is responsible for the advertising, promotion of brands to our smokers and trying to convince competitive smokers to smoke our products. They're accountable for the advertising, the positioning of the brand, the image, product difference, communicating that to smokers, and through advertising, through promotion, and discounting and pricing and so forth.
In terms of the way the concept of marketing is usually used, if, for example, if Winston or Doral were to overtake Marlboro, that would be a marketing triumph for R.J. Reynolds, wouldn't it?
Let me object to the form. You go ahead. I'm objecting to the way the question was framed with the introduction to it.
Could you repeat the question?
Yeah, I'm saying if one of your brands, Winston or Doral, which is obviously today very far behind Marlboro, if one of those brands were to overtake Marlboro in terms of the industry and in terms of the way it would be perceived, that would be a tremendous marketing triumph, wouldn't it?
Same objection. Go ahead.
If one of those brands happened somewhere to get a higher share of market than Marlboro, it would be certainly a success for that brand, if everyone did that.
No, but would it be a marketing success?
It would be a business success, and to what degree it would be a marketing success, I would assume that would have something to do with it, but it would be a success to gain market share to somehow surpass Marlboro, which I think is a highly theoretical sort of achievement or opportunity.
How long has Marlboro been number one?
As near as I can remember, I believe that Marlboro became the number one brand in the late 70s, somewhere in 1978 or 79.
In terms of the history of the tobacco industry, is it fair to say it's very unusual for one brand to be the leader for that long? I mean, Marlboro's case, we're talking, 27, 28 years?
Object to form. Go ahead.
Well, Marlboro's been an industry leader for about 18 years or so. Historically, I don't know the time frames, but there have been various brands historically in the industry. Lucky Strike's the number one brand for some period of time. I don't remember the exact number of years. Camel was the leading brand.
But isn't
while.
Isn't it your understanding
Were
that...
you done?
Were you done?
Yes.
Okay. Is it your understanding, though, that Camel or Lucky Strike, while they were number one for a period of time, was a lot less than 18 years?
I really don't know the time frame.
What do you attribute the success of Marlboro to these past 18 years? Their marketing, or advertising, or what?
I would attribute it to two things. I think they had a good marketing campaign with Marlboro Country, and I think they had an excellent product.
That's what I was getting at. Now, you referred to Marlboro Country, which I certainly assume you're referring to the cowboy motif.
Yes, the old Western.
Right. The advertising that one sees on billboards, the horses and cowboys, nature, and that kind of thing, and that would come under heading marketing. Is that correct?
Let me object to the form.
Well, to me, the comprehensive sense of marketing, I think it's whatever your advertising is as well as the product itself. So I would attribute any brand's success to both of those components.
Well, I mean, if we were to forget totally, put aside totally the advertising, marketing, media, and we were just a Winston and a Marlboro, are you satisfied the Marlboro tobacco somehow inherently better than Winston or Doral?
I believe over the years, Marlboro has a product that is tasted different than Winston, and it is obviously by its share of market preferred by the majority, or a large majority, or a lot of the people in the marketplace. So it's hard for me to separate those two things, because I believe that the marketing of the product has to do with the product itself as well as whatever the advertising is with it. So I think they're both part of whatever makes a brand successful.
Since you've been with Reynolds, have you ever conducted blindfold tests? You know what I mean by that?
On what?
Okay, where you would test whether or not smokers, blindfolded, without seeing the package, could distinguish, okay, now I'm smoking Winston, 20 minutes later I'm smoking a Marlboro. Are you familiar with that term?
You're talking about blind product testing.
Exactly.
Where they don't know what the brand is. There's no brand identifier. They're just smoking cigarettes and you're asking for their opinion.
Exactly.
Yes, we have done blind product testing.
And what have you found in that kind of testing?
What we have found in blind product testing, that if you take Winston, for example, that typically Marlboro, you say like Marlboro Lights, for example, would be preferred over Winston Lights by the smokers that you, on a blind basis, test against.
Okay, but what I'm trying to understand is, does the average smoker know, blindfolded, that he's now smoking a Marlboro as opposed to a Winston? You would have research on that.
The research that we do doesn't ask on a blind basis. You're not asking somebody if they can identify, is this a Marlboro or is this a Winston. You're asking them to evaluate which of these cigarettes they prefer, or how, well, actually, most of the time, it's one group will get Marlboros, another group will get the Winston, and then there'll be some attributes that they rate it against in terms of smoothness and harshness and things of that nature, and overall preference. Okay, so you're not asking them to identify a brand, you're asking them to make a judgment about how they view the taste of that product, and then how other smokers view the taste of Winston, and that gives you a sense on a blind basis of just the taste of the product. And out of that process, you get you get quantitative scores on those judgments, and typically our experience has been that Marlboro will be preferred as a product. It'll get higher scores in that kind of testing than Winston.
Right. Are you aware of any research either conducted by Reynolds or any other tobacco company which pinpoints whether a smoker can identify the difference between cigarettes blindfolded? Not what he prefers, but simply knowing blindfolded, hey, now I'm smoking a Marlboro, now I'm smoking a Camel.
Object to the form. Go ahead.
I don't know of any research that we've ever done that on a blind basis you're asking somebody,
What kind of cigarette
is this a Marlboro, is this Winston? I don't know of any research on
Okay.
that.
Are you a smoker?
Yes, ma'am.
And how old were you when you started smoking?
I think I was probably about 18 or so. It was somewhere out of high school in 1962. It was somewhere after I got out of high school.
Remember the circumstances, what attracted you, what started you smoking?
No, I mean, I just know that I was smoking. Friends smoked, my father smoked, his, friends and relatives, and I just became a smoker.
Okay. Have you smoked continuously from the time you were 18 until today, or was there ever a period of time where you decided to quit and did quit?
I quit. First time I quit smoking was when I was in Vietnam in 1969. I quit smoking at that point.
I would have thought that's when a lot of people started smoking, wouldn't it?
Well, it was certainly a stressful environment. I was an infantry officer, actually up in the 1st Air Cavalry Division up along the Cambodian border. I was in the staff out at this point, a fire base. And I don't know, as I recall, I had a bad cold that went on for a period of time, and I just stopped smoking because of irritation and that sort of thing with the cold, and I didn't smoke after that. And I still had, as I recall, another 6 months in Vietnam at that point.
So for how long a period of time did you stop smoking?
As near as I can remember, I believe the next time I started smoking, I think it was about 7 years. It was somewhere after I joined the company. I joined the company in 74, and I believe I started smoking again somewhere in 76 or something like that. As best I can remember.
So
that was 7 years.
You smoked from age 18 until what age?
I was 69, I was 25.
Okay. And age
24, 25.
Okay. No, give take. And at that point in time, you stopped smoking for 7 years.
Nearly I remember.
Okay. During the period of time you smoked from 18 to 25, give or take, how heavy a smoker were you?
I was probably a pack or a pack and a half a day, except when I was in Vietnam. I was smoking more when I was in Vietnam.
Well, as you look back, was it essentially the cold that you could not get rid of that caused you to stop smoking?
No, we're back almost 30 years. I remember that I had a cold and it was irritating, so I didn't smoke while I had the cold. And after the cold went away, just didn't smoke again.
Okay. Do you remember the circumstances? Now you go 7 years, you're a non-smoker, and one day you start smoking again. Was there a social circumstance or another kind of circumstance where one day after 7 years you said to yourself, well, I'm going to start smoking again?
As I recall, at that time I was working in a sales organization in Reynolds, and somewhere in the process I start smoking again.
From that time until today, have you been a constant smoker, or has there been another segment of time where you stopped?
There was one other time that I stopped smoking, and I was plant manager of the company, and I started that job in October '81. And I stopped smoking as a plant manager, and I think it was somewhere in 1985 or so, if I recall.
It was sometime in '85 when you stopped smoking?
Yes.
Okay. And did you have another cold, or
No.
what was you stopped smoking in
I
'85?
just decided I didn't want to smoke. I just stopped smoking.
And how long did you stop smoking? Because you tell me now you're a smoker.
Yes.
Okay. So in '85 you stopped smoking. For how long?
It was 3 or 4 years, as I recall. Best as I can remember.
Do you remember if there's any pressure from family, wife, kids, who wanted you to stop smoking in '85, or was
No.
it totally unrelated?
It's unrelated. I don't recall any pressure from family whatsoever.
Do you remember the circumstances in 1988 or 1989 when you would start smoking again? Or was it just you just picked up a cigarette?
Well, I just started smoking again.
Nothing stands out in your mind to the circumstance as to why you started smoking again?
No, nothing in particular.
Okay. And once you started smoking again in the late 80s, have you been a continuous smoker from then until today?
Yes.
Okay. How heavy a smoker are you today?
Pack and a half a day.
What brand?
Well,
No Marlboro.
no, I don't smoke Marlboro. I'll smoke all of Reynolds products at some point or another. Smoke a cigar once in a while. And as a regular band, I smoke Clips. I mean, it's the most normal, constant brand in that. But, basically, I'll smoke Camels, I'll smoke Winston, sell them, variety of our products, but no competitive products.
From approximately age 18 to about age 25, what brands do you smoke?
I smoked Winston's, and I smoked, I remember smoking Lux for a while. They're the only two that I can remember.
So basically, in your career as a smoker, there have been basically 2 stretches where you stopped smoking completely. One for approximately 7 years, and one for approximately 3 or 4 years.
Yes. Yes, sir.
When you stopped smoking on those occasions, were you able to stop smoking without any difficulty?
Yes. I described the situation in Vietnam. I stopped smoking and stopped.
And never started again until 7 years later.
Yes.
And you had no problem. You didn't miss a cigarette.
Oh, I think, it's hard to remember the 69 thing in detail. All I remember is that I stopped smoking and didn't start again, or didn't become a smoker again for 7 years.
Okay. And I'm certainly not asking you for detail, but as you remember the experience of stopping smoking when you were about 25 years of age, you were able to quit smoking without any difficulty.
Yes.
And that was all your experience in the late 80s when you stopped smoking 3 or 4 years. You were able to do so without any difficulty.
Yes.
Are warning labels on your cigarettes you sell to the American public, are they true?
What do you mean are true?
Are they true? One of the warnings on packages of cigarettes which you sell in the billions to the American public says smoking causes lung cancer, heart disease, emphysema, and may complicate pregnancy. And well, I'm simply asking you, is that true?
Let me inject that, misstating what the one says.
Well, it says before that, it says before that's some technical. Surgeon General's warning: smoking causes lung cancer, heart disease, emphysema, and may complicate pregnancy. And my question to you is that true?
I think it's true that the Surgeon General says he, I believe, created the warning label that we put on our pack. The Surgeon General says that cigarettes cause those diseases.
Well, isn't it Congress who did that?
Well, Congress, working, I guess, through the Surgeon General, public health people in Congress, said this is the law, this is the warning label to go on the back. It says the Surgeon General says that cigarettes cause these diseases.
Mr. Schindler, obviously, I'm not asking you, is it true that the Surgeon General says that? And I'm not asking you, is it true that that warning appears on your cigarettes? I'm asking you whether the statement is true.
My
Let me object to that for the whole introduction, Stanley, because it wasn't obvious to me, but if that's your question, go ahead.
My view is that cigarettes are a risk factor for those diseases, that they may cause those diseases. I do not know if they do cause those diseases. The warning label is given to the industry by Congress and Surgeon General says the Surgeon General says that it causes those diseases. My view is that cigarette smoking is a risk factor for those diseases. It may cause those diseases. I do not know if it does or doesn't in a sense. I believe it may be. It's a risk factor. So in that context, I don't know if that statement of it causes is true or not. It's what people believe that provided the label does, or the warning label.
Now, as I heard your answer and have understood your answer, it is your view that the statement that smoking causes lung cancer, heart disease, emphysema is inaccurate, because you believe that the accurate statement should say that smoking is a risk factor for those diseases, as opposed to saying it causes those diseases.
I will object for mischaracterizing what he just said. You can answer.
I believe that cigarette smoking is a risk factor for those diseases, which to me means that it may cause those diseases. That's my point of view.
I understand that. But therefore, having said that, obviously then, from your point of view, a statement which says cigarette smoking causes lung cancer is not accurate, correct?
Well, like I said, Mr. Rosenblatt, I believe that cigarettes are a risk factor for these diseases, and I believe, therefore, that means to me that they may cause those diseases. And that's my point of view.
What's another risk factor for lung cancer? Smoking is one of them, according to you. What's another one?
Well, I would think that there are things related to genetics, perhaps diet, exercise, or lack thereof, and a variety of things that may also be risk factors related to smoking. Family history that's related to genetics, a number of things, environmental factors, where you live, and so forth.
Tell me how you think exercise, the lack thereof, is related to lung cancer. You know, if some jogs a lot, they may get lung cancer.
Is my understanding of that I'm not a scientist, obviously, but it's my understanding of epidemiology that cigarette smoking is identified as a risk factor. And there may be, in things I've heard, read over time, that there are other factors that may relate to as risk factors for certain diseases. Talking about lung cancer here, which could involve genetic makeup, could involve environmental, where you live, perhaps diet, perhaps not having enough exercise, in combination some factor or other risk factors related to these certain diseases.
So on the issue of causation, your view is maybe smoking causes lung cancer, maybe it doesn't.
In my view, the cigarette smoking has been shown through all the epidemiology research and studies over the years. There's a risk factor for lung cancer and other diseases. Therefore, it may be a cause of those diseases. But from the standpoint of scientific proof in terms of mechanism and exactly how it might be the cause, that has not been formally determined in the scientific process. So I view cigarette smoking as a risk factor that may cause these diseases, and that's my view.
This is your personal view, or is this the company view?
Well, it's my view. It's the view of scientists that I've talked to at companies that have studied this issue. They're up on the research and literature, and people I've talked to over time about the whole issue of smoking and health.
Mr. Schindler, would you agree or not agree that there is a worldwide consensus in the medical community and in the scientific community that cigarette smoking causes lung cancer? Or do you think there is a controversy within the medical community and scientific community on that subject?
I would agree that clearly the majority of people in the public health field have stated that cigarettes cause these diseases. It is my view that it is a risk factor for those diseases and may cause the disease that we're talking about.
Have you ever read an article in the New England Journal of Medicine or any prestigious peer-reviewed medical journal in this country where a physician, an MD, unconnected to the tobacco industry, has taken the position that smoking is merely a risk factor for lung disease and there's no scientific evidence that causes lung cancer?
Jack, if you're trying to state, he said you mischaracterized if that material you said at the end. It's an entirely different question than I'll just object to form. Go ahead.
Could you ask the question again, please?
I'll let him, he'll read back to you. Exactly.
read an article in the New England Journal of Medicine, any prestigious peer-reviewed medical journal in this country where a physician, an MD, unconnected to the tobacco industry, has taken the position that smoking is really a risk factor for lung disease, and there's no scientific evidence that it causes lung cancer.
I have never read an article that you described like this. I have never read an article in the New England Journal of Medicine like you described. I believe that cigarettes are a risk factor. I believe that very strongly. And as a company, we have acted upon it by trying to improve products as an industry over a 30, 40-year period, with lowering the tar in cigarettes, which work we've done in recent years on products like Eclipse. So the fact I believe it may cause these diseases, to me what is relevant is what does the company and the industry has it done relative to acting upon the fact that it is a risk factor. I believe that we have done a lot over the years to address these issues with lowering of tar and trying to create products that address the risk related to smoking.
How many billions of cigarettes does R.J. Reynolds Tobacco Company sell in a year?
About 120 billion is our plan.
120 billion would be.
120 billion cigarettes a year.
I just want to make sure that people are not confusing that with millions.
No.
Okay. Now, don't you think the president and CEO of a company that sells that many billions of cigarettes to the American consumer, and you admit that it may cause lung cancer and heart disease, that you have a responsibility to read some of the independent literature so you know what the scientists and medical doctors are saying?
Well, I'm aware of what medical science, the doctors are saying. I spent time with our own people in the organization I manage discussing these issues. And they are competent, ethical people. We spent a fair amount of time discussing the whole smoking and health issues. And I'm very comfortable with my own personal belief that cigarettes are a risk factor for these diseases. I'm comfortable with what we've done as a company to address the risks that are associated with smoking in terms of trying to improve the product over time. Lowering of tar and other work that we've done over the years.
So lowering of tar makes cigarette smoking less of a risk factor?
I don't know if it makes it less of a risk factor, but for a number of years, up until, near as I understand it, until the late 70s, there was a sort of cooperative effort between the public health community and the industry to address tar as an issue with regard to potential risk of cigarettes, and a very concerted effort over a 20 or so year period to systematically work to deliver or to design and manufacture cigarettes that have substantial reduction in tar, which is the history of the industry and working with public health people up until, I understand, around the late 70s. So there has been an effort over the years to reduce tar in cigarettes as the area that there tended to be a consensus of where the risk may lie with regard to cigarettes.
Which of the Reynolds products has highest degree of tar?
I believe the highest tar would be more 120s, 120 millimeter small compass cigarette.
Do you know the percentage of tar expressed in milligrams?
I believe it would be around 21 or so milligrams of tar.
Just for the record, I think you mistake. It's not a percentage of tar.
Yes,
I think
the actual 21 milligrams.
Okay, 21 milligrams. What is the lowest Reynolds product in terms of tar?
And now, product which would be about 1 milligram of tar.
Are you telling us that now, in your judgment, is much less of a risk factor than more?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying it has substantially less tar. I'm saying that over the years, the industry had working for a period of time with public health people. We said the reduction in tar was the right thing to do with the design of cigarettes. That we in the industry and we as a company worked hard on providing products that reduce tar. So that all cigarettes today are substantially less tar today than they were 30 or 40 years ago. So whether or not that product is less risky than our tar product, I don't know. I know that it has less tar, which is an area folks that the public health people had for years.
But so what? In other words, if less tar is not safer than more tar, then for me as a consumer, so what? More has 21 milligrams. now has 1 milligram. Okay, one has 20 more milligrams than the other, but so what? Why should that be significant to me as a consumer?
I'm not sure I understand your
You're telling
question.
me it doesn't have any health consequences. So I'm saying to you, other than saying more had 21 and now has 1, I'm asking you as a consumer, well, so what's the significance of that 20 difference?
I object to the form of that. I'm not even sure what questions myself. Go ahead and answer.
I'm not sure I understand the question either. I'm not trying to be obstinate here. I'm just not sure. Could you repeat it, at least one?
Well, I'll ask it a different way. Aren't you suggesting in your advertisements of less tar that less tar is less of a health risk to smokers?
I don't believe we're suggesting that in advertising. I think what we're saying in ads, which is a regulation that we operate under, that if we run advertising or a piece of point of sale, that we're required to indicate what tar nicotine is by the FTC. That we are reporting what it is for that particular product that the ad is running for. So I don't believe there's any suggestion in the advertising that is, I believe, as you said, a less risky product. It has less tar.
Which signifies what?
That there's less tar in the product. There's nothing about us following the government regulation to indicate what the tar nicotine levels in our product. It's saying that we're suggesting or saying that it's less tar. There has been over the years a joint effort between public health people and the companies to create products that have less tar, because the consensus was that whatever risk is in cigarettes, the general reduction of tar would be the right thing to do. So the industry, working in the earlier days in a collaborative mode with public health people, reduced tar. Whether or not those products have less risk in them is something that would have to be determined over a long period of time. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. But the consensus was, from public health people, the right thing to do was to reduce the tar level.
Well, follow this hypothetical question. A friend of yours says to you as follows: I'm a smoker, and I'm getting a little worried by virtue of the Surgeon General's warning, and I've done some reading, and really worried about whether smoking is going to give me lung cancer or any other disease. But I really enjoy smoking. I don't really care what brand I smoke. All I really need is the jolt of nicotine. I'm happy with any brand. Now, I noticed that your product now has 1 milligram of tar, and I've been smoking more with 21 milligrams of tar. Don't you recommend I smoke now?
Object to the form question.
What would your answer be?
Same objection.
What would your answer be to that question? You're the president of J. Reynolds. I can smoke more, or I can smoke now. I'm asking you for your recommendation, since it now contains 1 milligram of tars. I'm smoking more with 21 milligrams of tar, and I ask you, Mr. Schindler, aren't better off smoking now? What's your answer?
Same objection.
Well, in this hypothetical question you've put on the table, I would tell my friend the same thing I told you. What I know about the whole issue related to tar levels, that public health people felt years ago that it was the right thing to do for these products to be designed in such a way that the tar level would be brought down. If the person said to me, do you think this product is safer, which I think is what you're implying in your hypothetical question, I tell them I have no idea. I just tell you what I know that public health people have said, and you make up your own choice. I don't really know if it reduces risk or if you're implying safer in the question, which I sense you are. I would tell them essentially the same thing I've told you. They would be free to make up their mind.
In this hypothetical, the friend is saying, he's a friend of yours, simply saying, no, Andy, I'm not interested in the history. I'm simply asking you, I want a direct answer, now or more. I want your recommendation, should I smoke now or more? Don't give me history, I just want one word answer, now or more. Are you able to give me one word?
Objection to form and ask the answer. You just answered the question.
Well, I would answer the question the way I just answered it to you. That's what I would tell my friend. I'm not in control of my friend's decision-making process. They're asking me for information, and I would provide them what I know. They would make their decision.
In my hypothetical, your friend is not asking you for information, and he's not asking you for a discourse. He's asking you, should I smoke more or now? In your opinion, I'm not following your advice. I'm simply asking you, do you recommend that I smoke now because it has less milligrams of tar, or you're not giving me an answer?
Wait a second. Same objection. Not even sure it was a question at the end, Stanley.
Question mark.
Can you read that back for me?
In my hypothetical, your friend is not asking you for information. He's not asking you for discourse. He's asking you, should I speak now or more, in your opinion? may not follow your advice. I'm simply asking you, do you recommend that I smoke now because it has 11 milligrams of tar, or not give me an answer?
Yeah, the question is, you tell your friend, obviously you're going to do what you want, but I recommend that you smoke now. Or do you not answer the question directly?
We object both on form and answer.
I think I've already answered this to you. I would share my information with them, what I understand about tar levels. And if my friend asked me, do you believe that a cigarette with less tar is less risky? I'd say I don't know. It may be, it may not be. I would share with them with what I understand. I wouldn't want to mislead friends. And the guidance from public health people over the years had been to reduce tar levels. I believe on the theory that that would be a better product. So we've worked as an industry to do that. This hypothetical question as to whether or not it is or isn't safer, I don't know. But I would share with them what I understand, and that it may be, but it may not be. I just don't have the data to make that kind of definitive answer to someone.
You wouldn't want to mislead a friend, but aren't you in fact misleading the American public when you state under oath in 1997 that it is your view that the Surgeon General's warning on your packs of cigarettes, which say smoking causes lung cancer, you're saying that's not accurate. It's only a risk factor. Isn't that misleading the American public?
He objected to form and also object to ask and answer. We went through his decision on the Surgeon General warnings a half hour ago.
I don't...
You know, in Florida we don't have speaking objections, because it disrupts the train of thought. It interrupts the dialogue. There's no necessity for that. Now, obviously, he's forgot the question, but where do you have it in mind?
I prefer that you repeat it after the back and forth.
You wouldn't want to mislead a friend, but aren't you in fact misleading the American public when you state under oath in 1997 that it is your view that the Surgeon General's warning on your packs of cigarettes which say smoking causes lung cancer, you're saying that's not accurate?
I don't believe I'm misleading the American public. I'm not sitting here in that context. You're asking my point of view. My point of view is that cigarette smoking is a risk factor for these diseases, which to me means that it may cause these diseases. And I recognize that that point of view is different than what his Surgeon General has on the warning label. But to me, the issue is if I believe that cigarettes may cause these diseases, to me the real question is what have we done as a company to respond to that? We ignored it. We worked to address how to improve products over time. And we've gone through this earlier in this deposition that we have worked to address those issues that the public health community believes may relate to the risk associated with smoking. And that's what we have done.
I am not asking you for your point of view. I am asking you, as the president and CEO of a company that sells billions of cigarettes to the American consumer, what evidence you have to say that smoking doesn't cause disease, but it's merely a risk factor. And you're telling me, as I've understood it, that you're telling us this, it's your point of view, based on discussions with technical people you had at Reynolds. Is that essentially correct?
Yeah. Well, I didn't,
yeah. Okay.
assuming to ask the question,
Yeah.
I didn't say that cigarette smoking doesn't cause disease. So I leave it the way you characterized it. I said that it may, that it's a risk factor, that it may cause. But science in the sense of laboratory studies with mice, where all the variables are controlled, that at the end of that, those types of studies, lab studies, that there's no more higher incidence, is my understanding, of lung cancer for those studies in mice that were exposed to smoking and mice that weren't exposed to smoking. Because of that, as I understand this scientific discipline, there's an absence of that kind of affirmative proof or the mechanism and what have you. So the cigarette smoking stands as a risk factor, which means it may cause these diseases. But it doesn't, as you characterized it, I said it doesn't. I said that it may.
It's fair to say, Mr. Schindler, that the technical people at Reynolds and you disagree with the Surgeon General's warning that smoking causes lung cancer. Correct?
I believe that it may.
Okay. Isn't that the equivalent of saying, I don't know whether it causes lung cancer? It may, maybe it does, and maybe it doesn't. So therefore, your answer is you don't know whether it causes lung cancer, smoking. Correct?
As I've testified up till now, I believe it's a risk factor, and therefore that it may. That the mechanism is exactly how it may work to confirm whether or not it hasn't been established, and therefore it may.
And I asked a new question. I've heard you say repeatedly that cigarette smoking may cause cancer. My new question to you is, isn't that the equivalent of saying you don't know if cigarette smoking causes lung cancer when you say may?
I think when I say it may, I think what that means is that it may cause it, it may not. But it's both of us.
What is your company doing to determine whether less tar is safer than more tar in cigarettes from a health standpoint?
What do you mean in terms of research? Or,
I mean, isn't that the question that the consumer has? In your judgment, if I smoke now, I'm getting less tar. If I smoke more, I'm getting more tar. And I want to know if less tar is safer for my health. I'm simply asking you, what, if anything, is Reynolds doing to answer the question?
Objective form.
You're asking, is Reynolds doing any research to differentiate levels of risk between low-tar cigarettes and higher-tar cigarettes? That's what you're asking me?
I'm asking you what Reynolds is doing to help consumers answer the question as to whether less tar is safer than more tar.
I do not know. I mean, I don't know how to answer that exactly in the sense of your question. What do you mean by what are we doing?
In terms of answering, are you doing any research or anything to help answer the question whether less tar is safer than more tar?
I don't know of any research that Reynolds is doing relative to that question. I believe that there are people in the public health community or medical researchers that I imagine are looking at that. Are people continually involved in reviewing the literature, and to what degree there is research going on around that they would be knowledgeable of that? I do not know of any specific research that we have going on relative to that. And that type of research, not being a scientist, but that would seem to me to be long-term epidemiological type of research. So our scientists would study literature, things that are published, if anybody's doing work on that. I do not know of any research that we are doing relative to that question.
Stanley, we've gone, I think, just an hour now. If you want to find a break point, it's sometime
Within
next, either
5
now or the
minutes.
next few minutes.
Within 5.
Thank you very much.
As the president and CEO of R.J. Reynolds Tobacco Company, is your paramount responsibility to your stockholders, your employees, to...
No, I think we have responsibility to our shareholders, I think responsibility to our employees, responsibility to our smokers and consumers to deliver products that meet their needs, responsibility to the communities that we work in, to be good corporate citizens. I think a public corporation has a number of responsibilities.
What is a document called a frank statement to cigarette smokers? Have you seen that document?
I've seen it 1 or 2 times before.
And what does it mean to you?
What does the document hold?
The significance of it. You've read it.
Well, I've only seen it briefly a couple times before, so if you're going to ask me to comment on the meaning of something I've only seen for a few minutes, weeks, a month ago, I would prefer to see the document.
I'll be happy to hand to you, after the break. All I'm asking you now is from a general or generic standpoint, and in the tobacco industry, when this, as you know, it was a full-page ad in the newspapers, called a frank statement to cigarette smokers. Generically, what is the import or the significance of a frank statement to cigarette smokers?
Same objection.
You're asking me to comment on a statement or ad or document that was back in the 50s, as I recall, that I've seen for a few minutes a couple times in the past. With that in mind, I will give you my point of view as what I remember, I think it meant. And my take on it when I saw it was the industry was committing research dollars to study the whole issue of smoking and health.
Okay.
Going off the record, 11:33. Speaking to the record, 11:50.
Okay, Mr. Schindler, at the time of the break, I was asking you some general questions about a frank statement to cigarette smokers. A couple of minutes ago, I handed you, did you mark it as Plaintiff's Exhibit A or 1? Plaintiff's Exhibit 1. And have you had time to go through that?
I really need a couple minutes because I just kind of glanced at it.
Take a couple of minutes and do it.
Stan, can I ask, go ahead and read. Is this some kind of retyped print or version? Because it's got some misspelling on it that I've never seen in any of the originals I've seen over the years.
Really?
Is this something that was Like the one Susan's looking at there is the one I recognize. Is this a retyped version?
Yeah.
Okay, because there are some.
Yeah, but other than the spelling of each every word.
So will represent for the record that what you intend this to be is an identical copy of the actual Frank statement. This is not that.
Correct.
Okay.
And we substitute in law for some later on.
Okay.
Okay, you've read it. Is it fair to say, Mr. Schindler, that on the couple of other occasions you've looked at this document, a Frank statement of cigarette smokers, you've never in the past read as carefully as you have just now?
No, it's not fair to say that.
So in other words, on the other occasion you've read just as carefully?
Well, I read it, yes.
Okay. Okay. How did this come about? What is a Frank statement of cigarette smokers in terms of public?
How did it come about?
Or how or why did it come about?
Can you give me I don't think it's on here, the date was back in the 50s, I believe.
Correct. I can give you the date. And the date I believe that it was published in newspapers in January 1954.
54. It's difficult for me to say how this came about. I was not there. I was 10 years old at the time. So I wasn't with the company or obviously a part of the company when this took place. I'm not sure I could say you how this came about in a definitive way.
Now, my understanding is, and I'm going to certainly say this to the jury in this case, I consider a Frank statement of cigarette smokers to be one of the seminal documents in the whole smoking and health controversy over the years. Do you consider it to be an important, seminal, significant, fundamental document?
I'm in no position to make the judgment.
Okay.
There are so many documents for me.
I think it's fair to say that this Frank statement to cigarette smokers came about as the result of certain research, scientific research that was published. Do you know what scientific research this would intend to address?
I do not know.
Okay. Do you know, I'm not asking you the names of newspapers or other publications where a Frank statement to cigarette smokers appeared in January 1954, but do you have any sense of how widely advertised it was at the time?
No, I don't.
Okay. Now, I told you this was published in January 1954. As you have read this document, is it fair to say that the sentiments expressed in a Frank statement to cigarette smokers are essentially the same today of, for example, your company? And if you want me to go get specific, I'll be happy to do so.
Well, I'd like to get a little more specific with the word sentiment.
Okay. In this first column, toward the bottom, there is a statement, quote, "We believe the products we make are not injurious to health."
Oh, yes.
You stand by that statement today, don't you?
Well, this is a statement that was made in 1954. Again, I'm nowhere near being involved in this company, so when you say, if I stand by its statement, I believe earlier in testimony I said that cigarettes are a risk factor and they may cause the diseases that are some of the diseases that are associated with smoking. So that's my view of how I feel today.
Yeah, I'd really appreciate a direct question, a direct answer to a direct question, and then elaborate all you want. And my question to you, Mr. Schindler, is: do you believe the products made by R.J. Reynolds Tobacco Company today are not injurious to health?
Well, as I've said before, I believe they may be. They may be. They're a risk factor, and they may cause the diseases that are associated, but it's not clear or determined scientifically that they do.
Now, in the second column, right about second paragraph. Quote, regardless of the record of the past, the fact that cigarette smoking today should even be suspected as a cause of a serious disease is a matter of deep concern to us. Does that sentence accurately reflect your sentiments as President and CEO of R.J. Reynolds Tobacco Company?
Before we go ahead, let me check, 'cause I'm not sure that's direct quote from the French statement. We may want to check that as part of that point I made earlier, Stanley.
Yeah, my thing. Yeah. Regardless of the record of the past, the fact that cigarette smoking today should even be suspected as a cause of a serious disease is a matter of deep concern to us.
Okay, so it is.
It's exact.
Okay. And right, I know this is testimony you're concerned with, and what you said a moment ago in terms of something you believe important. I want to make sure we've got it accurately and working on a proxy document.
Now, my question to you is, that statement I just read reflects accurately today your position as President and CEO of R.J. Reynolds Tobacco Company, doesn't it?
My position today, as I've stated several times in this deposition, is that cigarette smoking is a risk factor for a number of diseases, and therefore that means that it may be a cause of these diseases, and that there's work need to into the whole issue. So that's my point of view.
Okay. As you read the document, a frank statement to cigarette smokers, and this is being published in newspapers to the American people, and obviously it's addressed to cigarette smokers, correct? That's your understanding of this document.
It was published in, I guess, newspapers and magazines. I'm assuming that it's a statement to the American public,
Okay.
which would include smokers.
And you would agree, well, not to get picky, but the statement is not addressed to non-smokers, it's addressed to cigarette smokers, the title of it.
Yes.
Okay. Now, you would agree that as you read the document in its entirety, one of the fundamental promises that the signatories to the document are making the American smoker is, we're going to spend a lot of money researching the question of whether cigarette smoking causes disease, correct?
Object from the state what it does.
No, that's not word for word. The document taken as a whole, you would agree, would not, Mr. Schindler, that the promise being made to the American smoker is, we're going to spend a whole lot of money through the Tobacco Industry Research Committee to explore the question of whether our product, cigarettes, cause disease. Is that correct?
Same objection. Go ahead.
To me, what it says is that resources are being pledged to do research into areas that are scientifically related to the health risks associated with smoking.
And that's what the tobacco industry is still doing today, through the Council of Tobacco Research.
We give money to the Council of Tobacco Research. The industry does is to do basic research into those diseases that are associated with smoking.
Basic research, meaning, if you're understanding that the Council of Tobacco Research is funding scientific studies into what are the underlying causes of lung cancer and other diseases, correct?
Basic, I am not a scientist, as you all know. Basic research, to me, means that this is totally up to the Scientific Advisory Board that's up to fund projects, that basic research is into, for example, the causes of cancer, which ultimately could lead to cancers related to smoking, but basic research into cancer, for example.
What is your understanding today, in April of 1997, what conclusions have been reached on that subject?
I don't understand your question.
Basic causes of cancer.
Conclusion. You want to clarify by whom, Stanley? That's what I'm...
Yeah, by all this research that's being done.
I'm not a scientist. I don't feel capable, frankly, the basic cause of cancer.
Yeah, I'm certainly not asking it to you from a technical standpoint, but is it your understanding as a very well-informed layman that the causes of cancer in 1997, are they still a mystery, or do we know something?
Mr. Rosenblatt, I'm not a scientist. Things that I hear and read, broad category of cancer, people write about genetic predisposition, they write about environmental factors, they write about lifestyle factors related to diet and all sorts of things. But, so I don't, beyond that, I don't know how else to answer your question, not being a scientist. I mean,
Is it your understanding that those questions are still being researched?
the causes of cancer?
Cause of cancer.
It is my understanding that the scientific community is still doing a tremendous amount of research into the causes of cancer.
So more specifically, is it your understanding that Council for Tobacco Research, as well as your own company, is researching the basic causes of cancer?
The Council for Tobacco Research that we give money to has a scientific advisory board made up of some eminent medical researchers and top scientists around the country that take a project request from researchers and scientists and decide among themselves as to which research to fund, and that research is dealing with, in addition to other things, I'm sure, the causes of cancer.
Pretty much the same situation as was expressed in a frank statement to cigarette smokers. They wanted to do research then, back in 1964, and we're still doing research today, right?
Objections to form. Go ahead.
I can talk to today with the research and how the Council for Tobacco Research works. There's an eminent scientist and scientific advisory board that has total control over how this money is distributed for research grants that are posed to them into the causes of disease, cancer obviously being one of them, in terms of how they allocate the resources and make their judgment about projects.
Is cigarette smoking a possible cause of lung cancer?
We've
Object as an
You're
answer.
going to tell me we discussed that?
Oh,
It's a very direct, simple question, Mr. Schindler. Is cigarette smoking a possible cause of lung cancer?
Same objection as an answer. Go ahead.
Never asked and never answered.
We have discussed before. I believe that cigarette smoking is a risk factor for lung cancer and other diseases associated with smoking. And as I have said before, to me, that means that it may be a cause.
So it's a possible cause.
I say it's a risk factor for these diseases, and it may not be.
Is cigarette smoking a probable cause for lung cancer?
I believe that it's a risk factor.
Is there any more significant risk factor for lung cancer than cigarette smoking?
I don't know.
You mentioned that your father was a smoker.
Yes.
Is he living?
No, he's not.
How heavy a smoker was he?
He smoked, when he was a smoker, as near as I recall, probably 2.5, 3 packs a day.
And there came a time in his life when he quit smoking?
Yes.
And why did he quit smoking?
He went to doctor. He was having circulation problems. The doctor diagnosed, and he went to the doctor. And the doctor told him, he said, Dick, I happened to be with him when this happened. This was somewhere in the early mid-60s. He said, you can either stop smoking or I can cut off your hands and feet someday. And my father stopped smoking. At the time, he was 47 or 48 years old.
Do you know whether or not the doctor diagnosed his condition as something called Berger's disease?
I don't know if that was the term. I just remember that encounter in the doctor's office.
Okay. And other than your knowing it was a problem with circulation, do you know any more details than that?
No, I don't.
And your father passed away at what age?
He was 69.
Did he ever smoke again
No, he
after that encounter with the doctor?
No, he did.
He just careful, make sure he's finished the question. That time started answering. He was in the middle of it.
Did you have an understanding then, or did the doctor explain what it was about smoking that if your father continued was going to cause amputation?
No, I don't remember anything else other than what I told you.
Are you married?
Yes, I am.
Does your wife smoke?
Yes, she does.
How heavy a smoker is she?
Oh, my wife smokes a pack a day.
What did your father die from?
He had a stroke, and within a year and a half after the stroke, he died of a variety of complications. I'm not exactly sure the precise thing at the point that he died, but he had the stroke, and a year and a half later he died.
When your father had that encounter, you used to drive with the doctor, that was a pretty shocking, unusual kind of episode, wasn't it? It had an impact on him.
He stopped smoking.
He had been a heavy smoker for years, and after hearing the doctor say that, he stopped.
So I mentioned earlier, he was smoking, as I recall, 2.5, 3 packs a day. He had that encounter with the doctor at age 47, and he never smoked again. That I know of.
Did he have any difficulty with it?
I don't recall. We're back, 30-some years ago. All I remember is that he stopped smoking and never smoked again.
And you don't remember any problems they
I
had?
don't recall any. It's a long time ago. I know he never smoked again.
Did your wife ever quit?
She quit once that I can recall.
For how long?
I think it was for like 3 years or so. I'm not totally sure of the time frame, but she quit. It's about for 3 years, as I recall.
But I mean, this was during marriage.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. We've been together a long time.
You remember why she quit?
She decided she didn't want to smoke anymore. And she quit.
But why? I mean, did she have a cough or a cold?
I don't recall. I mean, I asked me, if my wife ever quit smoking. I said, yes, she did, and I recall for a period of 3 years.
Well, didn't you say there's something like, no, honey, you've been smoking X number of years, I noticed you're not smoking anymore, how come?
It was her decision.
She
stopped smoking.
I understand that. I assume you're a normal, curious guy. And your wife's supposed to pack a day for X number of years, and one day she stops smoking, and you don't say to her, how come you're not smoking anymore?
I don't recall saying to her, how come you're not smoking anymore?
And I'm sure when she started smoking 3 years later, you didn't ask her how come you started again.
No, she's an adult, and I assume she was making her own decisions.
And Mr. Schindler, whether it's children or wives or siblings, you take a totally hands-off policy as long as someone's an adult. They want to smoke, fine. They don't want to smoke, fine. You're Mr. Hands-off.
Object to form the question.
With regard to my wife, who's an adult that is fully knowledgeable and informed as to the risk associated with smoking, I think she's perfectly capable of making a decision.
How can she be fully knowledgeable, Mr. Schindler, if she listens to you, who says smoking may cause lung cancer and it may not cause lung cancer? After hearing that, how am I knowledgeable? Because I don't know whether it causes lung cancer or it doesn't cause lung cancer after listening to you.
Object to form again, I'm confused.
Me too. Could you ask the question again?
Very happy to. You're saying your wife is fully knowledgeable. I'm saying if your wife were to ask you, does cigarette smoking cause lung cancer, your answer is, well, sweetheart, it's a risk factor. Maybe it does, and then again, maybe it doesn't. So hearing that answer, how is she fully informed as to whether it does or whether it doesn't?
Same objection. Go ahead.
My wife is an intelligent adult that lives in our society, is aware of Surgeon General reports, is aware of warning labels and packs and ads, is aware of everything that is written continually about cigarettes. I think she is aware of, as almost anybody in our society, of the risk associated with smoking. She is a fully informed adult capable of making her own decisions.
You would agree, would you not, Mr. Schindler, that if someone accepts your view that maybe cigarette smoking causes lung cancer and maybe it doesn't, that as a fully informed individual, obviously it's a gamble if they smoke. Maybe they will get lung cancer as a result of smoking, and maybe they won't. And what you're saying, as I understand, is that's the adult choice, whether you choose to take the gamble. Is that correct?
As I've said before, I believe that cigarettes are a risk factor for these diseases. I believe, therefore, that they may cause them or they may not. I believe the public health people in this country, the scientists and doctors, have published vast amounts of data and information. The media has certainly covered this whole issue. It is inconceivable to me that someone, including my wife, would not be informed on the risk associated with smoking, and that when she or anyone makes a choice to smoke, or when I make a choice to smoke, that I am doing it fully aware of what risks are associated with the product.
When your father had the episode with Doctor that you described, you were how old then?
I'm 19, so 19 or 20 as I recall.
You were a smoker by then.
Yes.
After that episode, did your father tell you, don't smoke? Or did he tell you, Andrew, it's an adult decision, if you want to smoke, smoke?
I can't remember my dad telling me not to smoke after that. We're talking 30 some years ago. I just don't remember that in Canada.
Did either of your parents ever express an opinion to you when you started smoking and when they realized that you were in fact a smoker, that this is something you should not do? Or that it displeased them some way, the fact that you had become a smoker?
I can't remember a specific, we're going back 30-some years, I can't remember a specific encounter when my parents said, don't smoke. I imagine they probably made some comment, but I don't specifically remember.
You have children?
Yes, I do.
Do they smoke?
My daughter does.
How many kids do you have?
Two daughters.
Ages?
23 and 20.
One smokes and one doesn't.
23-year-old smoke.
Was there ever a discussion as to why one made that choice and one made the no smoking choice?
Well, at one point they both smoked, now only one of them smokes. The oldest, the 23-year-old smoke.
20-year-old smoked for a while, now she's become a non-smoker.
Right.
She had discussed the reasons why she became a non-smoker.
No, she stopped smoking.
What age did you let her start smoking?
Well, when they were, I guess, you know, at 16-year-old range, they started sneaking cigarettes, and my wife and I sat them down and told them that they shouldn't be smoking, that they weren't old enough to make that decision, that their health was associated with smoking, and that they better knock it off until they become legal age to smoke or to buy the product. Same discussion we'd have about underage drinking. And so, in terms of when did they actually become smokers, as far as I know, was probably around 18 or so. I know they snuck cigarettes and things of that nature, and we sat them down talking about it.
So the only time that you ever really took a position on smoking is as it relates to age. In other words, if someone is 18 or over, your point of view is that's an adult decision whether they choose to smoke or not to smoke is that decision. But if someone's under the age of 18 and you have any control or input in the situation, you will try to influence them not to smoke.
Object to the form. You can answer.
Could you ask the question again, please?
You couldn't have tried.
Well, the only time you ever really took a position on smoking is as it relates to age. In other words, if someone is 18 or older, their point of view is that's an adult decision. Whether they choose to smoke or not smoke is that decision. But if someone's under the age of 18 and have any control or input in the situation, you'll try to influence them not to smoke.
There's a lot in that question. Could you?
As I understood your testimony so far today, I asked you hypothetical about friends and other things that have come up. My understanding is that your point of view is if you're an adult, whether you smoke or don't smoke is entirely your adult decision, and I, Mr. Schindler, I'm not going to interfere or attempt to have input. The only time you will try to have input is if someone is under what you consider to be the age to make an adult choice.
Back to the form again, can I say?
If somebody's 21 years old or 45 years old or 35 years old and they ask me my point of view about smoking and the risk associated with smoking, I would talk freely to them about it, like we're talking here today. If I encounter, as I did with my daughters, somebody who is underage, I will certainly assert myself into my daughter's life if they're doing something that I believe is appropriate. I would be the same way about alcohol. If a daughter underage is drinking, I would have the same point of view. So the characterization that I would never talk to anybody as long as they're legal age is simply not correct. But if somebody is 25 years old, or 40, for me to inject myself into their life, I think is inappropriate. If they ask me my point of view, I would certainly share that with them as I have with you here today.
Does involuntary smoke cause lung cancer or any other disease?
You're talking about ETS, environmental tobacco smoke? So
Well, I call it, okay, I'll tell you exactly my definition of involuntary smoke. If I, as a non-smoker, am sitting in this room and 2 or 3 people are smoking, I'm being forced involuntarily to take in some of that smoke. So I'm talking about a non-smoker who's in a situation where there's other people with cigarettes. Some of that smoke comes into the non-smokers. My question is, does involuntary smoke, secondhand smoke, passive smoke, whatever you wish to call it, does that kind of smoke cause lung cancer or any other disease?
Let me object to the speech deficit question. Go ahead, Nancy.
So you're asking me, do I believe that secondhand smoke causes lung cancer? Is that the question?
Correct.
I don't believe it does. I don't believe that the epidemiology, as I understand it, talking to our scientists, points in that direction. I don't believe there's any epidemiology that points to secondhand smoke being a cause of lung cancer. And based on that scientific data that's been done up to this point, I don't believe it does.
So your position on involuntary smoke is different than your position on active smoke, correct? As I've heard.
My position on active smoking is the epidemiology has established smoking as a risk factor for certain diseases. My position on ETS, secondhand smoke, is that the epidemiology, as I understand it, and talking with our scientists, does not establish that as a risk factor.
Have you read the Surgeon General's report of 1986 or any part of that report?
No, I haven't.
Have you read the EPA report of 1993?
I have not read the report. I have had briefings and discussions on it and read things that report in newspapers and so forth.
Well, according to the EPA, secondhand smoke is a Class A carcinogen. On what basis do you say it's not?
On the basis that the epidemiology that has been done to this point collectively on secondhand smoke, summary of the studies, those included in the EPA and research done since then, if there's essentially one no risk, is cumulative risk is a 1.04. Well, the EPA issued their judgment that ETS or secondhand smoke was a Class A carcinogen. It excluded one study, as I understand it, and they had a 1.19 in their methodology. The research has continued, and is now down to 1.04. I believe their studies of males in the workplace or something like that had a statistical risk of 0.97, which means in that case that it's even less. And in my understanding, talking to our scientists, as epidemiology develops over time, and the number keep coming down, that it points in the direction of not being a risk factor. Also, understand in terms of other epidemiology studies, things related to diesel fumes, studies related to high-tension wires that had risk of 3 times, for example, the EPA would say, no, that's not enough data. So on very low statistical data has gotten even smaller and smaller relative to risk percentages. The EPA made judgment on cigarette smoke that was counter to other things they had done in the past, including one study that I understand that for risk relative to 1.65 on caffeine and heart disease. They declared that it was not relevant enough to make any judgments there. So it seems to me, and what I've discussed with our scientists in trying to understand this, that statistical data moves away, has continued to move away from this judgment that the EPA made. One of the scientific advisory board members, that was, I believe, at the press conference afterward, made the statement that the people in the room, this is from the EPA Scientific Advisory Panel, the people that came to that press conference were at greater risk of driving through the overall environment of Washington than they were from secondhand smoke. Stanley Grant in San Francisco made the statement, you have greater risk of not using your seatbelt. The Congressional Research Service that studied this independently concluded that there was not data here to justify the judgment the EPA made. So in looking at all of that and talking to our scientists, it is my feeling that saying secondhand smoke causes lung cancer, there's absolutely no proof for it.
Are you familiar with the Hirayama study?
No, I'm not.
Have you ever in your life read any epidemiology study?
I haven't.
What is epidemiology?
It's a medical science that studies statistical relationships around certain diseases and by interviewing people and tracking groups of people over time.
I want you to assume that Norma Broyne, who is a lead flight attendant in the Broyne class action, was brought up in Utah, never smoked, was never around smoke until she became a flight attendant. And she worked as a flight attendant for a number of years and developed lung cancer. I want you to assume that her doctors, as well as one of the most knowledgeable pulmonologists in the world who have reviewed her records say that her lung cancer was caused by her exposure to secondhand smoke in the airline cabin. What is your basis for disagreeing with that assessment?
Object to the form, Command.
My understanding of the epidemiology that has been done before, during, and after the EPA judgment is that it does not demonstrate cigarette smoking as a risk factor for lung cancer.
What causes normal lung cancer?
I have no idea.
I think you said that doesn't say cigarette smoking is a risk factor. Do you mean exposure to cigarette?
Exposure to secondhand smoke or ETS is a factor.
Your company sued the United States Environmental Protection Agency. Isn't that correct?
Several companies in the industry filed suit against the EPA and their judgment of secondhand smoke as a Class A carcinogen.
See that as a Reynolds, right? Okay. What status is that lawsuit?
All I know is that it's still in the court. I don't know the status beyond that.
And the reason you sued them with your fellow tobacco companies was because their report hurt your business, correct?
No,
And why sue them?
because we believe they were wrong in the judgment that they made.
Where did you sue?
I believe that's in a court in Greensboro, North Carolina.
One of the reasons you sued them, the United States Environmental Protection Agency, was because a tremendous number of buildings and government facilities ban smoking, correct?
That's not my understanding. I believe we sued them because we felt the judgment that they had rendered with regard to secondhand smoke was incorrect or wrong.
You would agree, would you not, that you have learned that since the EPA report came out, thousands of buildings in this country, hundreds of municipalities have banned smoking in their facilities, such as the United States Defense Department. And you're aware of that, aren't you?
And prior to the EPA report, thousands of buildings and communities and so forth
We're
had
doing it.
put restrictions in with regard to smoking.
Okay. And more after the EPA report, more followed, correct?
I suppose that's true.
How come they don't get? How come the only people who aren't satisfied that the findings of the Environmental Protection Agency and the Surgeon General and the medical and scientific communities on the issue of passive smoke, the only industry that questions that repeatedly and over again is the tobacco industry?
He objected to the form, Command.
I'm not sure what you're asking me.
Yeah, I'm asking you. Obviously, the people who had the power to ban smoking in buildings, in the Defense Department, in airlines, in governmental agencies, have concluded that environmental tobacco smoke is a danger to non-smokers. And my question is, how come the only...
I have no...
Wait, let me finish his question. He had finished it. Go ahead, Mr.
How come the only group in this society who has accepted that environmental tobacco smoke poses a danger to non-smokers is the tobacco industry?
Object to the form.
I have no idea if that's why any given company or governmental agency eliminated smoking in their work areas because they concluded that it's dangerous. I don't know what degree that was part of their decision. Pressure from employees. I had a variety of reasons, and it's impossible for me to discern all the judgments people have made. In the same time frame, people have accommodated smokers and non-smokers in their work areas. Other people made judgments to eliminate smoking. And I have no idea if all these different people have made the judgment on this notion of danger that you put out here in this manner.
You don't think it's clear that, generally speaking, the reason why the United States Defense Department, many governmental agencies and entities, many private employers and buildings have banned smoking in their facilities is because they are satisfied that secondhand smoke poses a health danger to non-smokers. You don't accept that as a general proposition that's accurate?
I don't. I mean, I don't know. I've not talked to these people. I know organizations that have accommodated smokers in the work environment.
You would agree, would you not, that there are no warnings on your cigarette packs that secondhand smoke causes any disease?
That's right. The warnings on our packs are the ones that exist today by direction of the government, legislature, working with Surgeon General and the FEC. So
And obviously, if that direction was not there, there'd be no warnings on any of your packs.
it's a theoretical, speculative question.
Well, let me ask you this hypothetical question. As president and CEO, you know, you're a decision maker, you're a decisive guy. That's you've got the job, presumably. There's no mandated warning. As far as government is concerned, as far as society is concerned, you have an absolute right to put on your packages anything you like. Would you have a health warning?
We
object. You mean now, Stanley,
Yes,
before...
now, today. Would you have a health warning on your Camels and Winston and all the other brands?
I think it's really a theoretical question. We've had health warnings on packs of cigarettes, on cartons, on advertising placements for over, 30 years now.
Because you were required.
Let it finish his answer, Stanley. Let's be fair here.
Through a process of public health officials, the industry legislators agreeing on what the social policy of society would be. And what we created were the warnings that are on the packs. We comply with that. It's there. It's been in our society for 30 years. The whole issue of cigarette smoking has been dealt with in various forms of social policy for years and years in this country. And a theoretical world that says, what would you do if nobody was doing any research into cigarettes, this doesn't exist. It's been an issue in our society for many, many years, and this is the social policy that's created, and you comply with that.
This is not a tough question. And if you're, hear me out, and if your ultimate answer is I can't answer it, that's your answer. I'm simply asking you. I want you to assume that there are no government-mandated warnings. As far as the government is concerned, you can put on your packs of cigarettes whatever you like. And my question to you, as president and CEO of R.J. Reynolds Tobacco Company is, isn't it true, Mr. Schindler, that if you were not required to put health warnings on your packages of cigarettes, you would have no health warnings?
Let me object to just write a statement at the beginning. Go ahead and answer.
I don't think that's necessarily true. I think the world that you're trying to create is a world where you would end up with government officials, public health officials, people in the industry resolving this issue for society, and that it would work in this theoretical world if that began today, or as it did 30 or 40 years ago. So it's inconceivable to me the cigarette smoking issues would be dealt with in this singular, somewhat narrow, discrete way that you described it. I think society, of which we are a part, would work and decide what to do with regard to health warning.
If in this hypothetical situation you put on the packages of your cigarettes any warning you wanted, would your warning say that Camels may cause lung cancer and maybe not? Is that what your warning would say? Because that's what I've heard you say repeatedly all day today. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't.
Same objection. That is the objection form. You can answer.
I think in the hypothetical world you have created for this question that companies, like health people, Surgeon General, legislators would work out what the health warnings are. And I don't believe the hypothetical world you create, that somebody's independent of that social structure, social policy issue would ever exist, and would work out as to what the labeling would be. Has it been in the past?
You're telling us that you were not required to deal with Surgeon General and various agencies of government. You would voluntarily seek them out for their input.
I'm saying that the process that existed in our society, given the issues surrounding smoking, would work its way through the total society in terms of social policy. And that's how you would end up with warning labels, which is what happened 30-some years ago. I think that process would happen again.
How many smokers quit smoking every year?
I'm not sure. Probably 1.5, 2 million, a couple million people in our society.
And obviously I'm not asking you why each and every individual quit smoking. I'm asking you a more general question. Would you not agree that the great majority of smokers who quit smoking do so because they are worried about the health consequences of the continuing to smoke?
I think people quit because of health consequences. I think people quit because of the cost of the product. I think people quit for a whole variety of reasons.
My question to you is, would you not agree that the majority of quitters quit for health reasons?
Objection. Asked and answered.
I don't know. I know that people have who smoke consider and concern about the health risk associated with smoking, and that when they decide to quit, people have that somewhere in their equation to quit it. But they have other issues as well. So I'm in no position to know what percent of people solely because of health risk concerns. I think that's part of the judgment, and to what degree that is total, I really don't know.
Well, don't you think that although your father's experience may have been unusual in how direct and scary his doctor was, do you think that it's repeated over and over and over again in doctors' offices throughout this country where a doctor tells his patient quit smoking for health reasons? Or do you think that's an unusual occurrence?
Go ahead. Well, I think doctors tell people to quit all the time.
For health reasons, right?
Yes.
Okay. You think there are many doctors that are telling patients, you know, you look a little nervous today, Jack. Why don't you take up smoking?
No, I don't.
That doesn't happen, does it?
I doubt it. I don't think so.
You wouldn't want that kind of doctor, would you? If there's such a doctor out there that suggests to non-smokers that they take up smoking, you wouldn't want that kind of doctor, would you?
I don't know what to say about that, Mr. Risenblatt.
Sure you know what to say.
I don't even know how to begin answering.
Sure you know what to say about that. You wouldn't want to know from such a doctor because you have very poor judgment in your opinion, correct?
You asked me if doctors tell patients to quit smoking, and they said yes, they do.
Now, what percentage of smokers who quit smoking have difficulty quitting?
I have no idea. Some do, some don't. I have no idea what percentage of smokers who quit smoking have what you call difficulty. I don't even know what you mean by difficulty.
Oh, I'll tell you my definition of difficulty is a guy or a woman that say to themselves, I smoke a pack and a half a day. This is a terrible addiction. I think it's going to kill me someday. I have sincerely tried to quit, and I can't quit because I'm hooked on cannabis and the Winston. That's what I mean by difficulty.
Have they tried to stop?
Yes, and they can't.
Well, 40-some million people have quit smoking. In 1982, the industry sold over 600 billion cigarettes. Today, the industry sells 480. Obviously, a lot of people have quit smoking. In my own personal family experience, people have quit.
Daughter?
My daughters, my wife, myself, my father, friends I know have quit. So when you describe difficulty, it's hard for me to exactly know. You're talking about being edgy or nervous for a day or two after you quit smoking?
No. How many of the quitters start again? You've had a lot of experience with that. You quit and go back.
I really don't know.
Now, these products that are on the market, nicotine gum, nicotine, you've seen all those. Isn't it your understanding that those products are on the market and make a profit because they are directed to people who are unable to quit smoking on their own?
Yes.
Is it your view that cigarette smoking is addictive?
What does that word mean? In our society today, when I grew up as a kid, addiction, back in the 60s, or as a kid, but 50s, 60s, 70s, addiction meant hard drugs, heroin and cocaine. It meant intoxication. It meant unable to control use of the drug. It meant losing your job. It meant desperate acts to get enough money to buy the product, robbery, burglary. That was, your family could break up. If you wanted to get off of the addiction, you had to be committed to some medical institution for some period of time. It went to massive withdrawal. Today, we talk about addiction and everything from caffeine. I saw that a British researcher talk about the addiction of carrots in the Wall Street Journal.
Carrot addiction?
There was a British researcher that did a research on carrots in the Wall Street Journal in the last year. An article written on the new frontier of addiction as relates to chocolate. People taught frequently everyday language, talking about addiction to television, talking about addiction to violent sports. And it seems to me, when you ask me, do I believe cigarettes are that full array?
I have a feeling you can say no.
Please let him answer that.
Okay.
Well,
The tape is going down.
Well,
It's a long, non-responsive answer.
I am really sorry.
It's perfectly responsive. You just don't happen to like it. And you
I
let it
love the answer. Because he's tiptoeing around very direct. His answer is no, it's not addictive. I'm hearing all this about heroin.
If you really did like the answer, you would have.
I love the answer.
Would have let him complete. That's the way you trial
Finish
it
the
with an answer.
Finish the answer.
Go ahead.
So when you have this broad range of definition of addiction, and you say to me, are cigarettes addictive? I say to you that cigarettes are like caffeine, not like heroin and cocaine.
They're not addictive. Bottom line is cigarettes are not addictive.
I think the word applies.
Okay, it's not addictive. Is it your view, Mr. Schindler, and I think that maybe we can get this question and answer, and is it your view that any cigarette smoker who has sufficient willpower and determination and really make up his or her mind can quit smoking if they really want to quit smoking?
I believe if you want to quit smoking, you can quit smoking, approved by the huge number of people who quit smoking.
And all the people that are using the Nicoderm and nicotine gum, they just lack character and they're a bunch of weak because they need help and they can't do it on their own. Right?
No, I don't. If they feel that they have a need for nicotine gum, Nicoderm to help them, I think that's fine. But I believe at the end of the day, giving up smoking is driven by your desire to give up smoking.
That's it.
Going on the record in take 1, 451.